In assignment 4, we're going to look at adding to what we've done in assignment 3. We are going to begin using an automatic postback. Postback is a round trip to the server. So anytime you click a link, click a button, anytime it requests something from the server, that is a postback or a round trip. Whether it's done synchronously or asynchronously, doesn't matter, that's still a round trip. We're going to use automatic postbacks, and we are going to, in this exercise, use an update panel with a script manager in order to prevent all of those page refreshes. So in the last assignment, the page was refreshing each time you clicked a button, which is normal operation. In adding the update panel with the script manager, it will eliminate that flashing. And basically, if you go to assignment 3 and you click a bunch of buttons and then you hit the back button, the browser back button, you'll notice that basically every time you've clicked a button, you have reloaded the page. And so your history is that same page over and over and over again. On this assignment, with the update panel and script manager, every postback that we make is not going to be a page refresh. It's just going to refresh that area of the screen. And so when you click the browser back button, if it's enabled, it will go to whatever the previous page was, not the same page over and over again. So that's a unique difference that we'll be doing in this one. You're going to learn about using the logical operators and and or. There's some notes up here on logic, and and or gates, binary numbers, hexadecimal. Some of that same stuff is in the description here. A little different example in the notes. We will look at calculating decimal values from 8-bit binary numbers. So you're going to learn about 8-bit binary numbers, some information down here, how you calculate the decimal value, and then once you have the decimal value, you will calculate the hexadecimal value, base 16, from the base 10 values, and use all of that. So I think the best thing to do at this point would be look at the finished solution. And your design is your own, so I'm not going to give you the images. You can make your own images. The design is part of the grade, so don't turn it in on just a white background. You'll lose all those points for the aesthetics part. So it doesn't have to be anything too special, but it does, make it look halfway decent. So when it loads, it's going to look like this. This one I laid out using a table. I felt like it'd be faster doing it in the video as opposed to all the CSS. You can still, if you want to drag and drop one on and then set the CSS and then position it and do all that, it's you can lay it out the same way. But for this video, I'm going to lay it out using a table, and it'll just make it a little bit quicker for copying and pasting, and because it's a whole lot of the same element, right? They just have different IDs. So we've got red, and there are 8 of them. So if you count those across, there's 8 digits there. So that's 8 binary digits. If we come back here to these notes, you'll see that the number on the far right-hand side is a 1 or a 0, and then it just doubles: 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128. And so here's an example of counting using 8-bit numbers. So in our assignment here, if I change this one to a 1, it's going to give me the decimal value of a 1, and it's going to give me the hexadecimal value, which is the decimal value divided by 16 along with the remainder. So we use the quotient and the remainder. The quotient is 0, the remainder is 1, so it's 0, 1. As soon as we select that first box, these become available down here where we do bitwise operations. So I'll come back to that. But as we select these, so this is the value of 2, so this should go to 3, right? Because you've got 1 and 1. So this is 1 plus 2 is 3. This one is worth 4. So we've already got 1, 2, 3. If we change this one, it should change to 7, and so on. And so if we want to make it 6, that would be 1 less. This one is worth 1, this one's worth 2, this one's worth 4. So if I change this one to a 0, that makes it a 6. This one's worth 2. If I change it to a 0, that makes it 4, and so on. This one's 128. So you'll notice that not only are we, every single time 1 is chosen, the decimal value is updated, the hex value is updated, and this color is updated. Now, if you start on the right-hand side, it's going to take you a while to actually see a difference in the color because you're changing it by very small numbers. If you start on the left-hand side, the color will change very quickly because you're changing it by 128, by 64, and so on. So again, every single time you choose one of these, the decimal value changes, the hex value is updated, the color is updated. Likewise, these bitwise operations, and we'll look at that a little bit more, but we can do the red color bitwise and with the green color, and that the result will display there. And a bitwise and is, we're looking at red and green. So basically, if both of these are 1, if it's 1 and 1, if both of these are 1, the result is 1. If both of them are 0, the result is 0. If it's a 0 and a 1, the result is 0. So it becomes 1, 1, and then the rest are zeros. And that's the result. But as you change it, so this one's already a 1 here, I'm going to change this one to a 1. Not only does it update the decimal value, hex value, color, it also updates this value right here. So it changed that number to a 1. If I change this to an OR, you'll see I've got a 1 and a 0 here. You'll see my value changes here. The OR is, if it's 1 and 1, then the result is 1. If it's 0 and 0, the result's 0. If it's 1 or 0, 1 or 0, the result is 1. If we come back, there's some more on that in here. So you can look at some explanation of the bitwise AND operator, the bitwise OR, the bitwise XOR. So a little bit on hexadecimal conversions and the table that you use for converting hexadecimal. I give you 3 values as an example. There's 3 more values in the notes, but you take the decimal value, you divide it by 16 and find the quotient and the remainder. And then you take that quotient and remainder, 8 and 13. 8 maps to 8, 13 maps to D, so it becomes 8D. And you do that for each number. And then the hexadecimal value, if you, the most common place you could look is in Photoshop, open the color picker, and you'll see hashtag, that's the hex value. But hex values are used in web development. They start with a hashtag. What we do is they are in red, green, blue order. So we take these 3 values, decimal value for each one of them, converted to the hex value for each one, and then we just put them together so that it becomes 8D41F3 as the hexadecimal value for that color. Here are some common hex values that you should just know. You shouldn't have to look up. So all zeros is black, all F's is white, and then they are in order. The first 2 are red, the second 2 are green, the third 2 are blue. So FF and 4 zeros is red, 00FF00 is green, 0000FF is blue. So those are some that you should just know just from looking at it. So your requirements are going to be to create this solution. So again, we're using an automatic postback. So every single one of these controls on the page, once you select something, it posts back. You'll see the page does not refresh, but the numbers update and the color updates and the bitwise operation updates. So we do that through, again, the lack of a page refresh is the update panel with a script manager, combined with doing an automatic postback. The automatic postback is just saying that basically on selected index change, go do something. So that's your automatic postback. Just a little explanation about what I've already explained to you and what's expected on this assignment. We're going to start by laying things out. I already have my images ready, so I'm going to use those images. I'm just going to drop them into the folder. And like I said, I'm going to lay this one out using a table because I think it'll go a little bit faster in the video for creating all these rows. So I'm going to do a File, New, Project, and I'm going to work locally here. So I'm going to do an ASP.NET web application, make sure C# is chosen. Again, make sure that you choose the correct one here. It's amazing how many questions I get about that, and it was just a matter of choosing the wrong one. So ASP.NET web application, hit next. I'm going to call this Assign04. I'm going to put it on my desktop. Actually, I'm just going to choose the desktop. There we go. So it'll create a folder for me called Assignment 4. This is defaulting to 4.6.2, so I'm just going to leave it there. I'm going to hit Create. I'm going to do an empty, hit Create again. And there I've got my assignment coming up. First thing we can do is come over here on the solution. Let's right click, add a new item. Make sure you're in C#, web forms. We'll add a web form. Down here we'll give it a name. On this one I'm just going to call it, let's call it color converter. So I've got it colorconverter.aspx. I'll hit add. So now you can see I've got my ASPX and my .cs. I'm going to go ahead and do a Control-Shift-B to build the project. I want to make sure that I can see my output. So now I've got just these two open. In my div here, this is where, again, everything goes. So the first thing I'm going to put in there is a script manager. So in your toolbox here, again, if your toolbox isn't showing, go to your view menu. Or if it's over here on the side and it's not pinned, you might have to click it to pop it out, and you can pin it there so that it's always there. We're not looking in the standard toolbox for this one. You're going to look in the Ajax extensions here. So you should have more than just the standard there. And then inside of the Ajax extensions, we're going to use the script manager and the update panel. So what I'm going to do is just click and drag the script manager, and I'm going to drop it in between that open and close div. So I've got my script manager there, and then below that I'm going to click and drag an update panel and put it below my script manager. And you'll see that we've got the open and close update panel. I'm going to make my page look like this. And then in between the open and close update panel, I'm going to start typing. You'll see that we can do a content template. So I'm going to do an open and close content template, and then all of our content goes in here. So we're going to build our table in there, lay everything out, just like we would inside of the open and close div, but instead of being in there, everything's going to be inside of here. And that way, anytime we do those postbacks, the script manager will handle it so that the page doesn't refresh. I'm going to go ahead and open my folders here. So I've got my working solution. I'm going to copy my my JPEGs. So I've got an R, B, and G, and then I've got a header and footer. Header and a bitwise is my footer. So I'm going to copy those and paste those into my Assign04 folder, just where I'm working off the desktop there. That way I have access to them, and like I said, I want you to create your own graphics for this one. So you can do something similar to what I did. That's fine. You can do something different, but do more than just change the background color. That's not what I consider aesthetics. So don't just change the background color and expect to get all the points there. Inside of our content template, we're going to lay out our table. So we're going to start with an opening table tag. Set the style so that we can set the width, and I'm going to make mine 1500 pixels. It's pretty wide, pretty narrow. And set the border to 0. Oops. So there's my open and close table. Inside of there, I'll put my first table row, and it's going to have a column TD that spans columns. It'll span 15 columns is what I have. So there I've got my open and close TD. I'm going to put my header in there. Image source equals, and I'm going to point it to header. You'll see that it picks it up there for me. And then I'm going to do closing tag there. After that, we're going to have a heading row. So we're going to do TD, and I'll put a non-breaking space in there. And I'll have 8, 6, 7, 8. And the second one will change from a non-breaking space here. The second one we're going to do a call span equal 8. And inside of there, we're going to do a div. Open and close div. We'll put the title binary digits. And we'll set the style on that one. And just center it. We'll skip 2, and then we'll do decimal value. Skip 1 and do hex value. And then this one's going to be color. So again, around the color, I'll do this div with the aligned center. The other two are going to be in fairly narrow columns, which is why I haven't put the div in there. This one is just going to align it over the that actual color square. This one is spanning a lot of columns, so I just kind of centered it. These two are going to be over columns that are not much bigger than that text is to begin with. So you can put divs around them if you want. But after that, we are going to start laying out our drop-down lists. So let's start with our open and close TR here. So this is going to be our red row. We'll start with a TD that's got a div in it and an image that points to r.jpg. So we'll lay that out, and then the others are going to be a little bit repetitive here. We'll have 8 in a row that are a lot alike. So we're going to close this Ajax extensions, and we're going to go back to the standard here. So make sure you're back in standard. And we need a drop-down list. So I'm going to click and drag that drop-down list, and I'm going to make sure that I'm in between that. Oops. Sorry, hold on. I am going to put that back. That's what we wanted. As I was dragging, I noticed that's wasn't. So this will all be one row. So where I want to put it is in between this open and closed TD. As I got over here, I saw I was about to drop it between an open and closed TR, which you don't put anything there but a TD or TH. So that's why I stopped. So now I'm going to click and drag this drop-down list and put it in between this open and closed TD. So I've got my first drop-down list. The ID on this one I'm going to change to red 8. And I'll tell you now, as you are naming yours, name them the same way I name mine, because I am going to use that ID to find the color. So later when we get to the C# code, we're going to grab that ID and we're going to check and see if it contains the word red, the word green, or the word blue. So as you are creating your IDs, make them similar to mine. Otherwise you're going to have to change the C# code when we get to that. So we've got the run @ equals server there. We're going to add a couple of things after a bit, but for right now we're just going to lay this out. We'll do an ASP list item with a value equals 0 and text equals 0. And then we'll do one more list item with a value equals 1 and text equals 1. So this drop-down list will generate a select, an HTML select, and then this list item will generate an HTML option. So it's select option option. In HTML, when you have an option here, you have an option value equals, and then you have text that goes between the open and close option tag, if you remember that. So it's open option value equals, and then you have the text between the two tags, and then you have the closing option tag. So the way that we do it here, just trying to show you how it relates, this drop-down list will become a select. This will generate an option tag with value equals 0, and then the text between the open and close option tags will be 0, and so on. So we're going to have a whole bunch of these in table data cells. So next I'm going to grab this TD, copy it, paste it, and I want you to notice that it automatically changes the ID for you there. And so we're gonna change those as we go to make them be what we want them to be. So there's 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So this will become red 6, red 5, red 4, red 3, red 2, red 1. That gives us 8 in the red column. So we've got our image followed by 8 table data cells. Below that, we're going to put an empty one with a space in it. Below that, we'll put another one with an equal sign in it. Then we're going to have a text box for the decimal, and then another text box for the hexadecimal. So we'll have a table data cell, and we're going to drag and drop. Let's find our text box over here. And I'm going to make sure that goes right in between those two open and close TD. So I've got my text box ID here. I'm going to put an R in front of it for red, and then DEC for decimal. It will have run at equals server. I'm going to add a width of 100 and set the initial text to 00. Next, we're going to have another equal sign. And then we're going to have another text box. So I'm going to, again, drag and drop this text box right here. This one I'm going to call R hex text, R hex text. And that'll finish out that row. So that allows us to put it into place fairly quickly. We're going to do the same thing for green, but at the end of green we're going to have that box for the color. So we'll do that at the bottom of the green one. So if we come up here, our table row, it's going to, oops, not there. Our table row is going to start again with an image that will change to G. And I'm going to go ahead and copy just this first TD for the drop-down list. Come down here. We've got, there's our opening table row. Moved it clear out there. Put it back in place. And we have to finish that closing table row. So make sure that those match up so that you're not missing any. If you're missing some, your table might get messed up and not look the way you want it to. This ID that says drop down list 1, we are going to change to be green 8. This image source here, we're going to change to point to g.jpg. So now we've got our drop-down list with our IDs starting on green, and it's the same thing that we just did above. So we're going to make 7 more of these. So I'm going to copy this TD and do 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then I'm going to do green 7, green 6, green 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. And I'll remind you again, there's a reason that I'm using the words red, green, and blue. It's because when we get to the C#, I am going to check the ID to see whether it contains the word red, green, or blue. So as you are making yours, keep that in mind. Either I suggest you just follow along and make it the same as mine, but realize if you don't, you're going to have to make changes in the C#. So just keep that in mind. We've got the same thing here as up above. So we've got these items here that I'm going to put inside of this table row. So make sure that they are inside the table row. You'll see that it changed the text box IDs. So we're going to go with G decimal text, and then we're going to go with G hex text. And I forgot to set the width and the text on the second one. So let's go ahead and take care of that. I'll do 100 and set the initial text again here, and then I'm going to copy this and put it up above because I forgot to put it in this one. Now, in addition to that one, we are going to place an ASP table cell that we will then be able to change the color of. For this one, we'll just type it out. Now you're not going to see it appear. You'll see table appear, but we'll do table cell with a capital C. We'll go ahead and do the ID of BG color and the run at equals server. And then close it out so that it gets that closing tag. And you'll see that it's fine like that. Now we're going to add some things to this. Inside that opening tag, we're going to set a row span of 2. Going to set the background color to start out as black. Give it a width of 200. We're going to set border style, border color, border width. So border style is going to be solid. Border width is going to be 3. And border color is going to be black. And then that will change. Well, the border color won't, but the background color will change as our numbers, as our digits change in the 8-bit binary numbers. So again, we've got another row to add. So there's our next row. And once again, I'm going to grab that top part. Here's our last TR. I'm going to grab the image and that first table data cell. And I'm going to move this back over. So there's the image. This image is going to be the blue image, so I changed that to a B. You'll notice the ID here changed, so we're going to change it to blue 8. And from that point on, I'm going to grab this table data cell and do 765432 blue 7, blue 6, so now we've got those drop-down lists in that third row. And again, we've got those bottom ones here. Now do not copy that table cell. We just need the non-breaking space, the equal sign, text box, equal sign, text box. So we're going to grab those, paste them here. So we've got that. Our IDs here are going to change once again. This is going to be lowercase b and then decimal text and then we'll change this to be hex text. And the rest of that will stay the same. Just about done laying out this page. I'm going to go ahead and do a Control-Shift-B. So in the next row, we're going to have our footer image, and then we're going to have our controls, our drop-down list to select what kind of bitwise operation we want to perform. So we've got our next row. Our top one is going to include that image. I'm going to actually grab, just like we've been doing, I'm going to grab the image and then that first one again. I'm going to change the source of the image to point to what I called bitwise.jpg. And now this table data cell I'm going to set to a column span of 3. Set the style of text align so that we center it, and also vertical align to the bottom. So you'll notice inside of this one TD, we're going to put all 3 of the drop-down boxes, but the drop-down boxes are going to be a little bit different because we've got the red, green, and blue, and we've got it starts out as a double dash, so nothing's selected. So this first one we're going to call bit1, so bit1. We'll leave run at server. Again, we'll add some more to all of these drop-down lists after a bit, but for right now, we're just going to call that one bit1. Our list item here, this top value is going to become double dashes. And then we've got one for red, one for green, one for blue. So we'll do the red. So there in our first one we can choose red, green, or blue. I'm going to copy this drop-down list, and I'm going to paste it twice. This second one is going to be called bit2, bit2. Oops, lowercase though, lowercase. Everything is case sensitive, so bit2, and then this one, bit3, bit3. Now this bottom one, it can stay the same because it's the same as the first one, but this middle one, that first one stays the same, nothing selected, but then we have an ampersand, a OR, and an XOR. Again, an ampersand, an OR, and an XOR. So that gives us our 3 drop-down boxes in the bottom right of our solution to choose from. Much like the ones up above, we're going to have an equal sign and then a text box. It's going to be a little bit different. I'm going to grab an equal sign and a text box here. The text box, I'm going to go ahead and rename that ID to be bitwise result. Capital R in that, so bitwise result. Width of 100. I'm going to get rid of the text there. Run at equals server. Now this I'm going to change, and I'm going to make it into an ASP label. So I'm going to drag and drop a label from here into that space. The ID for that label, I'm going to call it bit equal, BIT, capital E, bit equal, run at server, the text is going to be the equal sign. I've made this one a label so that we can set the visibility of it in the C# code. If we were just putting an equal sign like this up above, we wouldn't be able to do that. But since I've made it an ASP control and given it an ID, I can now enable it or disable it and set the visibility to either on or off. And that should finish out our code for the ASPX. I'm going to go ahead and do a Control-Shift-B. Looks like everything's working pretty well. Now we've got quite a bit of C# ahead of us. So let's go ahead and right-click, View in Browser. And it looks like we've got an issue with formatting here. So I think I know what it is. Let's go look at that image that was placed right there. And this TD that holds this bitwise image, the footer image, should have a column span of 9. Do a Control-Shift-B to rebuild that. And let's view it in the browser again. That looks much better. So now everything's spaced out. We've got our heading centered over our 8 digits. Got 8 for red, green, and blue. We've got our decimal value and our hex values, our color box. This, it looks like, is off a little bit, so let's go look at that. So down here on these two, on the ones above, I put a style of vertical align bottom. So let's do a style. Vertical line of bottom on that one, and also the other one, and that should make them line up. So rebuild that. View it in the browser. There, it looks like everything's matching up. Now nothing's going to happen, right? We've just got controls on a page. We don't have anything behind it. If you right-click, view the page source. It's always good to have a look at what ASP.NET generates. Notice we've got select, name equals, ID equals, option value. There's the value equals, there's the text equals, all the way down through there. So it's always good to look at the source that's generated so you get a better idea of how the code you're writing generates the end result. So in the code behind, the first thing we're going to do is set a variable, and let's look at there we go. So initially, when the page loads, these are not visible, and it's only after you choose any of these, doesn't matter which one. Let's choose this one. It's only after you choose one of them and change one of them that they do appear. So we're going to create a flag, a Boolean flag, true or false, that will tell us whether or not that first one has been changed. And then we're also going to check to see if it is the first page load, and if it is the first page load, then we want to disable these and set the visibility so that it's disabled. So the first thing is inside of this class, so we've got public partial class, color converter. We're going to create a variable, a global variable up here for the application of type bool. Bool is either true or false. It's short for Boolean, so bool. And we're going to call it first value changed. So this is a Boolean true false flag for displaying the bitwise. So we've got our variable declared up here just inside of the class. the page load. Page load happens every time there's a post back. And we can put an if statement in there to check and see if it is the first time that the page is loaded. So basically we can check to see if it's a post back. If it's not a post back, then it's the first time the page loaded. Otherwise, every other occurrence would be a post back. So to understand that is every single time that was a post back, 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 that was a post back. So every single time I change, page load is being called. So inside of page load, we're going to put an if statement. And we're going to check for not page dot is post back. So page dot is post back will be true if we make any one of these changes. So, but the first time the page loads, when everything is zeroed out, the first time the page loads, right there, it's missing, it is not a post back. So if it is not a post back, we're going to hide some stuff. So if it gets in here, this is the initial page load, and I'm not going to type out all the comments that I have in the images of the code. So if you want to go and look at the images of the code, there's more comments there than what I'm going to put here. We're going to set first value changed to be equal to false. That tells us that no values have been changed. Then remember we have bit 1, bit 2, and bit 3. So we're going to do bit 1 dot enabled is false, so we can't use it. Bit 2 dot enabled is false, so we can't use it. Bit 3 dot enabled is false, so we can't use it. Now we're also going to set the visibility on them. So we could accomplish this with one or the other, but in this exercise I want you to be familiar with both of them. I'm just using this as an opportunity to show you how to enable and disable controls on the page, as well as how to show and hide controls on a page. So if we set these to false, it's going to gray out those controls and we cannot use them. And then when we set them to true, it will set them so that we can use them. We'll do bitwise result. Oops. Enabled is also false, and it will stay false. We don't want people typing something in the text box for the bitwise result. Then we're going to do bit1.visible, and we're going to hide it. So we'll say, is it visible? That's false. Remember we created a label, called it bit equal. Because we're hiding everything else, we needed to create a label so that we could hide that equal sign as well. And then bitwise result. And then this is end page load. I'm going to do a Control-Shift-B. One succeeded. And now when I view this in the browser, it should hide those bitwise elements at the bottom. So I'm going to right-click on my ASPX, View in Browser, and those are indeed hidden down here. So that was the first thing that we needed to accomplish, but that was a pretty easy task. Next, we're going to create our own function. This is going to be public void, no return type. We're going to call it value changed. It's an event handler, so it's going to have object sender, event args e as parameters. So rather than double clicking one on the other screen, we're going to go ahead and create this one here, and then we will add the onSelected index change on the ASPX when we're done. So inside of our variable here, this is going to be called for all 24 of those drop-down lists that are zeros and ones. So we are going to declare some variables. They're all going to be integers. So we'll say int num1 is equal to 0. All the way through 8. So each time this function is called, we're going to grab the numbers from that particular row. So if we change one that's in the G row, we're going to grab all 8 from the G row and recalculate them. So the next part of this is similar to what we did in assignment 3. We'll create a couple of variables here, and then we're going to cast the sender into a drop-down list. So we also need string color that we'll set equal to the empty string right now. And first value changed, we're going to go ahead and set to true, because once we have changed any one of those on the page, then the first value is changed, so we set that equal to true. Next, we've got the sender. So the sender, whatever calls this, is going to be a drop-down list. So much like in our other examples where we used a button, this time we're using a drop-down list. So we're going to declare system.web UI web controls drop-down list DL. So we've declared a variable, instantiated an instance of that variable. DL is equal to, we're going to cast the sender. So in order to cast it, we again type system.web.ui web controls drop-down list. So now we have taken that object sender and we have cast it into the type drop-down list, and now DL is a drop-down list that we can use on the page. I'm going to go ahead and build this. Good. So at this point, we could either continue working this out, but I think what I'd like to do is go ahead and call this from each of those drop-down boxes. So what we'll do is come back to the ASPX, and we're going to add 2 things to all 24 of those drop-down lists that have zeros and ones. I'm going to start at the very top on red 8, where we have ID equals red 8, runout equals server. I'm going to add on selected index changed equals value changed. You can see that pop up because I've already created it in in the C#. But in addition to that, I'm going to set AutoPostBack equal to true. So what those two together signify is that when this drop-down list is changed, so you change it from 0 to 1 or you change it from 1 back to 0, it's going to call this function value changed, and it's going to do it automatically. So it's going to automatically post back to the server so that that C# code can execute. Now we need that in all of these. So please make sure that you're pasting it into the proper location. It needs to be inside the opening drop-down list of only the ones that are zeros and ones. Be careful that you don't paste it in the wrong location. Double check it when you're done. Come down to the second 8. It's the same thing. We're calling the same function. Oops, I pasted that in the wrong spot there. And then the third grouping of 8. Okay, so we've got all 24 of those done. They should all say onSelectedIndex changed, pointing to the function value change that we just created. They should all say AutoPostBack equals true, so that when it is changed, it will automatically post back to the server. I'm going to go ahead and do a Control-Shift-B to rebuild that. Once we've done that build, it should have compiled in this connection back to this function here. Since we have those onSelectedIndex changes pointing to this function now, and we have used sender and cast it into a drop-down list, we're going to have an if-else block here. And it is going to check to see if the red drop-down was changed, or the green, or the blue. So we'll do an if statement. And inside of that, we're going to do dl.id.contains if it contains the word red in lowercase. So I told you when we were setting the IDs of those, there was a reason I was doing red, green, and blue. I'll do else if dl.id.contains blue. They don't necessarily have to be in order of red, green, and blue. Else if dl.id.contains green. So now the contents of each one of these is going to be basically the same, except we've got to grab the correct row. So we're either grabbing the red 1 through 8 or blue 1 through 8 or green 1 through 8. And once again, just like we did in the last assignment, we are going to use the convert class to convert the textual value into a number and store it into these integers up here. So if the ID contains red, it was in fact red. So we're going to set num8 equal to, we'll start with red8.selectedValue. But you'll see that there's a problem with that because red8.selectedValue is text and num8 is an integer. So what we're going to do is convert .toInt. We'll do toInt16 this time. and make sure you put your closing parenthesis on the end. So now our error has gone away, and we need to do that for the other 7. So I'm going to copy this, and on the left hand side we change this to num 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And on the right hand side over here we change this to 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So we are grabbing each one of these drop-down lists, the selected value of it, converting it to an integer because it's either a 0 or a 1, and then storing it into num1 through num8. So if a red one was chosen, if a red one called this function, a red one was the sender, we cast that sender into a drop-down list, we check to see if the ID contains red, we grab all the red ones. Otherwise, if a blue one did it, then we have exactly the same thing except blue. One more item inside of here before we move to the next one. We set that string color up above. We're going to do color equals red. And I'll put that in lowercase. So now that we have that, I'm going to copy the contents, paste it into the blue section. So if it gets in here, it was blue. The color down here should be blue, which I'll make all lowercase. All of this can stay the same, but right here, all the way up and down, becomes the word blue. So again, if one of the blue ones was selected on the ASPX and it called this function, that blue one, that blue drop-down list, becomes the sender. We cast that sender back into a drop-down list. We check to see if the ID of that sender is red. It's not. We check to see if the ID is blue. It is, so it comes in here and it does this set. And again, we're going to copy that one more time for green. I'm going to copy the red one. If it gets down here, it was green. We set the color to green, and then likewise these get changed from red to green. So it should look pretty much the same for each one of them. You've got red, red all the way down, red here, blue all the way down, blue here, green, green all the way down, green here. Still inside of value changed. Since we have 8 of those now, so if one of the green ones was changed, we have grabbed all 8 of the green ones, and we need to calculate the decimal value. So I'm going to create a new function to calculate the decimal value. So I'm going to put a comment here. And we're going to call a function that we have not created yet. I'm just going to put, for the moment, the name of it, calculate decimal. After that, we're going to call another function that we've not created yet. This one is going to change the background color, which is called change color. Likewise, we have we want to check and make sure that if the first value was changed, we want to enable everything that's on the screen. So right here is where I'm going to put an if statement that checks to see if first value changed. So that's either true or false. If it's true, then we get inside the if statement. That means that the first drop-down list was changed. So display the bitwise controls. So all of those up above that we set to, well, not all of them, sorry. Most of those that we set up above here, we are going to change down here. Now I'll grab all these. I did not grab first value changed, so make sure you don't grab that. And I grabbed another one that we're going to delete. We're going to keep bit 1 enabled through bit 3 enabled. We're going to delete this bitwise result .enabled. We're going to keep bit 1 visible through bit 3 visible, and the bit equal and the bitwise result. But all of those we're changing from false to true. So count those there, make sure there's 8 of them. If there's 9, then you've got one too many, and maybe you copied one too many or forgot to delete one. So you've got bit 1 through 3, bit 1 through 3 again, and then bit equal and bitwise result. All of those set to true, so those will display on the page once this function is called. And then lastly, we will call a function to calculate the bitwise value after every change. And that one will be called bitwise. So we've got 3 functions there that we are going to create. I'm leaving them commented out so that we don't have errors. I'm going to do a Control-Shift-B. And now what we can do at least is we can make sure that this appears. So if we come over here and we right-click on the ASPX, view in the browser, and it doesn't matter which one you choose. Upon choosing it, it should do a postback, an automatic postback. It calls that function value changed, and in that function value changed, it sets the it enables these 3 controls, and it sets the visibility of these 5 so that they are visible on the page. After end value changed here, that closing parenthesis, let's go ahead and create the calculate decimal function. So again, we'll do access modifier of public, return type of void, calculate decimal, now calculate decimal is going to have 9 parameters that it accepts. So we're going to pass into it the string color, the integer, we'll call it B1, int B2, int B3, int B4, int B5, int B6, int B7, int B8. So bit 1 through bit 8. So it accepts 9 parameters. So in order to call this function, you have to pass it 9 parameters. Well, it just so happens we have 9 parameters up here. We have num1 through num8 and color. So in order to call this function right here, we have to pass it 9 parameters. And you can see, since I have created this down here, when I try to do it up here, it tells me what I need to pass in. So if we had done this beforehand, it would not have helped us here. So we create this first, and that way we uncomment this and we start filling it out, and it will help us with what needs to go there. So I'm going to pass it in the variable color, num1, through num8. So num2, num3, num4, num5, num6, num7, num8. So let's make sure we didn't miss any. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then we've got the color. If you've got any misspellings or you missed a comma or anything, I'm sure Visual Studio is underlining it for you. So now we have called this function from this function. Now let's come down here and focus on calculate decimal. So within calculate decimal, we're going to create another integer called total. And then we're going to multiply each of these bits that were passed in, bit 1 through bit 8, by their appropriate value. So it's 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128. So we're going to say b1 is equal to b1 times 1. Now I realize we don't have to do that, but leaving it off might make some people ask a question, so let's just do them all. b2 is equal to b2 times 2. b3 is equal to b3 times 4. b4 is equal to b4 times 8. b5 is equal to b5 times 16. b6 is equal to b6 times 32. b7 is equal to b7 times 64. b8 is equal to b8 times 128. So now we have taken each one of those bits. Each one of those bits is a 0 or a 1. So if it's a 0, obviously, then that bit equates to a 0. If it's a 1, it equates to the number that's on the far right side. After that, we need to total them together. So total is equal to b1 plus b2 plus b3 plus b4 plus b5 plus b6 plus b7 plus b8. So we've taken all 8 of those, we've added them together, and we've stored them into the integer total. That gives us our decimal total to write into that decimal text box. So let's go ahead and write it to the text box. The thing is, there are 3 of them, so we need to use the color that was passed in up here, string color. We'll say if the color is double equal to red, then we will do r dectext.text is equal to total.toString. Else if the color is double equal to blue, we will do b decimal text.text is equal to the total.toString. Oops. Finally, else if the color is double equal to green, we'll do G DEC text.text is equal to total.toString. Now, as you're typing there, if you notice that, G DEC text doesn't pop up for you, well, then you should go back to your ASPX and make sure that you named it properly. So this little section right here is writing the decimal base 10 total to the text box for the appropriate color. Now there's another text box for hexadecimal. So we need to also write the hex base 16 value to the text box for the appropriate color. So we're going to have an if-else just like up above, except we're going to call another function that we have not written yet. So this one is going to look just like this one here. And there's a couple ways to do it. Now instead of DEC text, we want this to say our hex, B hex, G hex. So up here you want to make sure you've got DEC, and down here you want to make sure that these three have HEX. Now it's not going to be total.toString though. It's going to, in these three spots, we're going to call a function called calculateHex, and we have not created that function yet. So for right now, I'm going to leave this just like this, and we are going to just define that function. So outside of calculateDecimal, I'm going to do public access modifier. Return type is string. So public string calculate hex accepts an integer that I'll call a. Because it returns a string for right now, I'm going to put return the empty string, and that gets rid of our squiggly line there. We'll change this, but we have defined this calculate hex function so that now we can finish these lines up above here. So instead of this total.toString that we have here, this is going to become calculate hex, and we pass hex the total. And that is going to be the same for all three of them. So no matter what color it is, that doesn't matter. We're just trying to calculate the hex value. So we are taking the total. So let's say that the total was 255. We are passing 255 into calculate hex, and it is going to calculate the hex value of 255. It will send us back FF, and we will place FF into this location. And then same thing here, we do it again. Same thing here, we do it again. So remember that each one, because red, green, and blue are broken out, each one is just 2 characters. So that finishes this calculate decimal. And now we can come down and look at calculate hex. And actually I have calculate hex broken into 2 functions. So calculate hex has part of it, and it's going to call another function called get hex from number, which will return the string. So we will we'll define that function as well. So let's go ahead and do a public string, return type is string, get hex from num. It accepts an integer that I'll call int num. This is end get hex from num. And this is end calculate hex. Now, get hex from num has a return type of string, which means it's expecting to return something. So I'll put a return the empty string, and that'll get rid of that red squiggly once again. So we are going to work on these two functions right here because they are called from here. So when we send it a number, I gave the example of 255, it's going to call calculate hex and pass in 255. And then we are going to work with that in order to get the values, the hex values, and return them. Inside of calculate hex, we're going to have a few variables. So we're going to say int num1 is equal to 0, and int num2 is equal to 0. Each time calculate hex is called, it's going to be calculating two characters, 0 through 9 or A through F, and it's going to return that together. So we've got num1 and num2 because we've got a quotient and a remainder, and then we've got a string first num is equal to the empty string, and string second num is equal to the empty string. So we're going to set num1 equal to, we will group A divided by 16 mod 16. And then num2 we will set equal to A mod 16. The modulus operator gives you the remainder. So in this bottom one, let's use 255 as an example for A. So 255 mod 16, it goes 15 with a remainder of 15. So the remainder of 15 is what gets stored here. It gives you the remainder. In this top one, we take 255 divided by 16, and we get 15 and a fraction value. And then the remainder of that is going to be the 15 because it's a smaller number. So when we divide it by 15 divided by 16, the remainder is 15, but it drops the decimal part. So we create our num1 and our num2 that way. We'll do first num is equal to get hex from num, and we will pass it in num1. And then we will do second num is equal to get hex from num, and we'll pass it in num2. Well, I realize we haven't done get hex from num yet, but we'll go ahead and finish this one. We're going to return first num plus second num. Now, first num and second num are text. They are string values. So this is a concatenation operator. It's not an addition operator. So we are concatenating first num with second num. So now when we pass num1 into get hex from num, we have to get the hex value. So inside of get hex from num, we'll create a string called hex num, set equal to the empty string. We will do an if statement that checks to see if the num that was passed in, that's there, highlighted it. So if that is less than or equal to 9, then we just use the value. So we say hexnum is equal to num.toString. So if it's less than or equal to 9, we just use the value and convert it to a string. But if it is 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, we have to convert it to A through F. So we do an if statement that says if that value, we'll wait for it to highlight, there it is. So if that value passed in is greater than 9, in that case, we'll have nested if statements. And I'll write one, so it's if that value is equal to 10. Oops, is double equal to 10. Then hexnum is equal to A. And then we're going to duplicate that for 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So make that 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. But then it changes to B, C, D, E, F. And I've got an extra equal sign there. There we go. So we're saying this value is passed in. If it's less than 9, just convert it to a string and store it here and then return it. So let's finish this return down here. We return hexnum, of course. However, if the value passed in is greater than 9, then we check to see if it is 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, or 15. 15 is the max, that's the highest it'll be. And then we use that chart, 10 maps to A, 11 to B, 12 to C, 13 to D, 14 to E, 15 to F. So we set the value of hexnum, and then we return hexnum as a string back to here. It gets stored into first num and second num respectively. We concatenate them together. Those two return the hex value to here and store it into either R hex text or B or G hex text to be written on the screen. So let's go ahead and do a Control-Shift-B. When succeeded, right-click on the ASPX, view in the browser. And let's choose this one, 128, hex value of 80, 128 plus 64, 128 plus 64 plus 32, plus 16, plus 8, plus 4, plus 2. So we wind up with 255 and FF. 1, 3, 7, 15, 31, 63, 127, and 255 for the FF. Take any one of them off. They all call the same functions, so if one of them works, they all work, right? So next, let's change this color. So that color is staying the same. Let's go ahead and use our decimal and hexadecimal values to change that color. Calculate hex. There's our end function. I'm going to create another function called public void change color. It does not accept any parameters. And if you'll remember, we call this from up above. So now that we have defined the function, we can scroll up here inside of value changed, and we can call void color converter dot change color. So again, we don't pass anything into it. All we do is call the function. Back down here at change color, you'll see it changed to one reference there. So in this, we're going to do 3 strings. So string R color, B color, G color, we're going to do a simple if statement just to make sure, a boundary case, in case the color's not been entered in for some reason. We'll do an if statement. If R hex text dot equals the empty string, then R color is equal to 0, 0. Else R color is going to be equal to R hex text dot toString, and then we do the same thing for green and blue. Change this to G, this to G, this to G, and this to G. So you've got 4 places so that those match up. This one goes to B, 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 and I accidentally hit something, and B. So make sure those match up, make sure those match up, make sure those match up, and these, those, and those. So if any of them are empty, we set them to 00. Otherwise, we get the value out and we store it into the color itself. Well, into the string color. And change color. So now we have the 3 colors. We are going to change the background color. So we're going to do BG color. If you remember that from the .aspx, .back color is equal to system .drawing .color translator .from HTML, and you'll see that from HTML accepts a string of HTML color. So I'm going to put a hashtag. I'm going to put a semicolon at the end there. I'm going to put a hashtag concatenated with R color, concatenated with G color, concatenated with B color. So we've created our hexadecimal color. Hashtag red, red, green, green, blue, blue. So there's 6 characters there. So we're passing that into this function, which should change the background color of that block that is on the ASPX. So let's go ahead and do a Control-Shift-B. Right-click on the ASPX, view it in the browser. And now I'm going to go over to the 128s because that's where we see it the most. So And there it is. And you should be able to modify it as you want, see what you can make it become. So now we have the bitwise operation down here at the bottom. At the bottom here, outside of change color, we're going to do a public access modifier, void return type, bitwise. You'll remember that we said we were going to call that from up above. This one can be called one of two ways. It can be called by changing the red, green, blue drop-down list, or the and or XOR drop-down list, or the other one of those three at the bottom, or it can be called from a function up above. But because it can be called from a control on the page, we have to put object sender eventargs e as parameters that it accepts. Doesn't mean we have to use them, but we have to have those there in order to call it from those controls on the ASPX. Now, we only want what's inside here to execute if all three of those in the bottom right have been chosen. So if we've only chosen one of them, we don't want to try and do a calculation because we don't know the operator or the other operand. So we're going to do an if statement. And right here I'm going to do end bitwise, and here I'm going to do end outer if statement. In this if statement, we're going to check to make sure that the values do not equal that double dash. So we want to say if not bit1 dot selected value dot equals and not bit2 dot selected value dot equals and not bit3 dot selected value dot equals So now you should have three conditions in there, all anded together. They should all have nots in front of them. So we want to make sure that the double dash is not selected before we do anything else inside of here. We'll go ahead and declare our variables. Int num1 is equal to int num2 is equal to 0. And int result is equal to 0. And then we're going to have quite a bit more that's inside of here. Since we have defined this function here, we're going to go back up here into value changed. You'll notice that we had this one that we went ahead and did. We had this one that we went ahead and did. Now we've got this bitwise function. You'll notice that when I type the opening parenthesis, it says it's expecting object sender event args e. Well, it just so happens that we pass into this function sender and e. So we're just going to pass those along to the next function. So we take sender that was passed into this function, and we just pass it along to the next function. Same thing with e. But that allows us to go back to the ASPX and put in the event handler call. So if we come back to the ASPX, we go down to these three items right here, and we add the onSelected index change equals, and it is going to point to bitwise along with AutoPostBack equals true, just like we did the others. We're going to copy those two and we're going to paste it into the other two so that all three of those bits, bit 1, 2, and 3, will call that bitwise function automatically. We're going to do a Control-Shift-B. Succeeded, good. We'll go back to the code, the C#, and we need to finish this one out, and there's a good little bit left to do inside of here. So we're going to find the value of the first number. So we're going to do an if statement and say if bit1 selected value dot equals r. Then we're going to do num1 equals convert dot, and this is the first time that you have seen convert to byte. So we are going to do convert dot to byte, and you'll see the description there. Converts the value of the specified object to an 8-bit unsigned integer. Now that's not zeros and ones, and it's but it is just 8 bits. So an 8-bit unsigned integer, and then we're going to use that to and an or to find out what we need to do to finish our bitwise operation. So we'll do 2byte r decimal text dot text. So there's the first one. Now we need G and B. So we'll change this to G and this to B. Likewise, we've got to change this right here to G and B. We leave it as bit 1. We're still looking for bit 1. So if bit1 dot selected value is G, or if it is B, then we convert the correct decimal text into that first number. So that first drop-down box, did we select R, G, or B? Convert those to 8 bits, unsigned integers. And then likewise, we've got to get the second number. So we do that exact same thing. This bit 1 becomes bit 3. This num1 becomes num2. But we're still looking to see if it is R, G, and B. And if it is R, we're using the R decimal text. G, we're using the G decimal text. B, we're using the B decimal text. So that part stays the same after the copy and paste. So just make sure that you've appropriately kept those the same, the R, G, and B in the same, but make sure you've changed this to bit 3, bit 3, bit 3, and num2, num2, num2. Now what we're going to do is find out the result that we can then use the result down below in a series of if statements to generate our zeros and ones. So we are going to do we'll do the calculation. So we're going to do an if, this time bit 2, selected value equals the ampersand. If that's the case, we're going to set result equal to num1 and num2. So basically, if num1 is 64 and num2 is 128, it should come, or actually is 192, it should come out of there with 64. as the common. We're going to take that and we're just going to change this to an OR and this to an XOR. Change this to an OR and this to an XOR. We've still got result num1 and num2 stay the same. Bit 2 stays the same all the way through there. We've just changed the operator that we're looking for. So for the rest, we're going to have a string that we'll call in binary and an int for the binary number is equal to the result. And the rest of the way down is going to be repetitive. So first we'll start with looking for 128. So we'll say if the binary number is greater than or equal to 128, then we're going to set in binary equal to 1. And take the binary number, set it equal to the binary number minus that value of 128. Otherwise, we're going to set in binary to be 0. Now this one is a little bit different than the rest of them because it is the far left one. So instead of setting in binary equal to in binary plus 1 or plus 0, it's the far left one. It's the first one we're starting with, so we just set it equal to that. So next we look for 64, and I'm going to type it out again. So if the binary number is greater than or equal to 64, again it's going to be in binary, but here you'll see how it's different. In binary equals in binary plus 1, concatenated 1, and then we subtract that 64 from the binary number. Otherwise, we do the in binary is equal to in binary concatenated with a 0. So that's how the rest of them will look the rest of the way down. So if we successfully get into this one, we'll add our hex value of 1 on there, and then we'll subtract 128 from the total. We'll check to see if it's still greater than 64. If it is, then we'll add a 1 on and subtract 64. Otherwise, we'll add a 0. And we keep going all the way down until we have finished all of them. So I'm going to copy and paste from here for 32, 16, 8, 4, 2, and 1. So there's my 64. I'm going to do them one at a time though. So this one becomes 32. We're checking to see if it's greater than or equal to 32. We're subtracting the number 32. So we've made those 3 changes. In binary equals in binary plus 1, or concatenated with 1 stays the same, or 0 stays the same. This binary number equals binary number minus the 32 is what we changed. So now we're going to copy the rest of the way down. We just need to change the numbers. This one is 16, 16, 16, 8, 8, 8, 4, 4, 4, 2, 2, 2, 1, 1, 1. So as we go down, if it's 255, it will get into every single one of these if statements, and we will concatenate 1, concatenate 1, concatenate 1, all the way down. Otherwise, there will be some zeros in there. Once we've done that, we have bitwise result dot text is equal to in binary dot toString. So we will set that value of that text box equal to what we calculated here going down through the if statement. Do a Control-Shift-B. Let's view this in the browser. I'm going to choose red and green. So it should be 1 and 7 zeros because we only make it a 1 if both of them are 1s. So this should become 2 1s and 6 zeros. Good. 3 1s, 5, 4 1s and 4 zeros. It should stay 4 1s and 4 zeros. 4 1s, 0 1. Good. Good. Change this to an OR. So this should be the only 0 that we have there. And then we've got the XOR, where we've got number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right here, where it's a 1 and a 0 together, is the only one with a 1. The others that are the same are zeros. Let's do R and B. And those first two, correct? Or the second to last one would be the only one with a 0, that's correct. XOR, anywhere where there's a 1 and a 0 together. 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0. Looks correct. Green. So every time we change it, it should be changing the decimal value. It should be changing the hex value. It should be changing the color. It should be changing the value down here every single time you select something. So that finishes out our assignment there. This last part that we did is repetitive, and we could shorten that down. And that'd be something for you to think about. Anytime you see something repetitive, now this is a boundary case, so it's different, but all the rest of these are the same except for the number. So you should ask yourself, how could I make that more efficient, have fewer lines of code? Should be able to. Not should be able to. You can write this one if-else in a way so that you've only got it appearing one time. Now whether you put that in a function that returns a value each time, or whether you put it into a loop of some kind, there's always multiple ways to solve a problem. But you should think about things like that, and I left that in there. I'm going to leave that in there intentionally for you to think about. Some of these others could have been much longer. This right here could have been a very repetitive piece that appeared inside of this other function, but instead we just call it, or it could have appeared multiple times anyway. So that gets us through the code. Again, the images have more commenting than what I've done here. So that, to recap, we have looked at AutoPostBack, which automatically posts back each time the element is changed. We've looked at setting our event handlers once again, but we've done it on drop-down lists this time. An important thing that we did this time was the ScriptManager and the UpdatePanel. And again, those two work together so that the page does not refresh every time you choose something, every time there's a post back. We use the page load function and we check to make sure that it was not a post back. If it's not a post back, that means it's the first time loading. And we did some initial setup inside of that first time load inside of there. So that was our initial setup. And then let's see, we used the convert class once again, converting to 216 as well as to byte. Again, we did casting. This time we cast the sender from the event handler. We cast the sender into a drop-down list so that we could then use that object. Hopefully I'm not forgetting anything to recap. We did a lot with creating our own functions in this one and calling our functions and looking at return types. So it's quite a bit different from what we've done to this point so far. So hopefully you found this interesting and a little challenging. Hopefully you learned something new from it, or something that will help move you forward.